The year is 2018, and modern weather prediction systems have never failed quite like this. A bomb cyclone, meteorologists' term for a storm that intensifies with terrifying speed, is about to transform Cedar Falls, Montana, from a quiet mountain town into a survival scenario that would test the limits of human endurance. In just 6 hours, temperatures would plummet 50 degrees, winds would howl at hurricane strength, and 18 inches of snow would bury a community that thought they were prepared for anything. But no one was prepared for what would happen to Emily Johnson on Elk Ridge Road. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. About 8 miles outside town, where pine trees stand like ancient sentinels, and the nearest neighbor is a 20-minute drive on a good day, a young pregnant woman named Emily was about to face the most terrifying night of her life. At 38 weeks, pregnant, she was already counting the days until she could hold her first child. Her husband, David, a software engineer who worked remotely from their mountain retreat, had promised they'd move closer to town before the baby arrived. That promise would prove to be 1 week too late. Emily wasn't like most expectant mothers in the area. She'd grown up hiking these mountains with her grandfather, a retired park ranger who taught her to read the sky like a book and trust her instincts above all else. While other women might have panicked at the first sign of trouble, Emily had developed a remarkable ability to remain calm in crisis. It was a trait that would save her life. David Miller was another story entirely. A brilliant mind. When it came to coding and problem-solving in the digital realm, he became paralyzed by indecision when faced with real-world emergencies. His love for Emily was unquestionable, but his ability to handle pressure was about as reliable as their satellite internet connection during a storm. When Emily's contractions began at 3 p.m. on March 15th, just as the first snow began to fall, David's carefully planned emergency procedures evaporated like morning mist. What neither of them knew was that 12 miles away, Samuel Whitehorse was preparing for a very different kind of night. Sam, as he was known to friends, carried 2 worlds within him. The traditional Cherokee healing knowledge passed down through 7 generations, and the formal medical training he'd earned during 15 years at Denver General Hospital. At 58, he'd retired from city medicine to return to his roots, settling in Cedar Falls to be closer to his extended family and the land his ancestors had walked. The Whitehorse clan had always produced healers. Sam's great-grandmother had delivered babies during the Trail of Tears. His uncle had treated bullet wounds during Vietnam. But Sam was perhaps the first in his lineage to hold both a medical degree and the sacred medicine bundle that contained herbs and tools used by his people since time immemorial. When the storm warning came across his weather radio, something deep in his chest told him this would be a night for both kinds of medicine. In the community of Cedar Falls, Pastor Margaret Thompson was reviewing evacuation plans at St. Mark's Church. Maggie, as everyone called her, had seen her fair share of mountain storms, but the meteorologists were saying things she'd never heard before. Unprecedented was a word that made her nervous. As the church's designated emergency shelter coordinator, she was responsible for ensuring the building could house and warm up to 50 people if necessary. What concerned her most were the families living in the remote cabins scattered throughout Elk Ridge and Bear Mountain areas. The storm hit like a freight train. What began as gentle snowflakes at 2 p.m. had transformed into a howling monster by 5 p.m. The temperature, which had reached an unseasonable 45 degrees just that morning, was now racing towards zero. Roads that had been clear and dry 12 hours earlier were becoming impassable death traps. Emergency services reported multiple accidents, and the volunteer fire department was stretched to its limits. Emily's contractions were coming every 7 minutes when David finally acknowledged what she'd known for the past hour. They weren't Going to make it to the hospital. The contractions had started mild and irregular, but now they were unmistakable. The baby was coming, and it was coming tonight. David grabbed his keys with shaking hands, muttering something about getting help, about the clinic in town, about how everything would be fine. Emily watched him struggle into his boots, her breath catching as another contraction gripped her. "David, you can't drive in this," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. The wind was rattling their cabin like an angry beast, and snow was building up against the door at an alarming rate. "I'll go slow," he insisted, already halfway out the door. "I'll find someone, Dr. Chen or someone at the church. You just breathe, okay? Do those breathing exercises from the class." The door slammed shut, and Emily was alone with the storm and her unborn child. Dr. Janet Chen was indeed at the clinic, but she was dealing with her own crisis. 3 rooms full of patients with cold-related injuries, a heating system that was struggling to keep up, and a communication system that was failing by the hour. When her satellite phone managed to connect with the regional hospital, the news wasn't good. No ambulances could navigate the roads, and even life flight helicopters were grounded. They were on their own. Meanwhile, David Miller's pickup truck was sliding sideways down Elk Ridge Road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The 4-wheel drive that had never failed him was no match for this storm. Every instinct told him to turn back, but the panic in his chest pushed him forward. His child was being born right now, and he wasn't there. His wife needed help, and he was the only one who could get it. The ditch caught his truck at mile marker 7. One moment he was sliding slowly down the road. The next, he was watching his headlights point uselessly into the trees. The engine died with a sputter, and David was left in the dark with the realization that he'd just made everything much worse. Back at the cabin, Emily was discovering reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. Between contractions, she'd managed to start a fire in the wood stove and gather towels and blankets. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "When you're lost in the woods, panic kills you faster than cold or hunger. Think, then act." She was thinking very clearly now. The baby was coming whether help arrived or not. Samuel Whitehorse was checking on his elderly neighbors when he heard something that shouldn't have been there. A human voice crying out against the wind. Most people would have dismissed it as a trick of the storm, but Sam had learned long ago to trust sounds others dismissed. His grandmother used to say that the wind carries truth to those who listen. He grabbed his medical bag and the medicine bundle his Aunt Grace had given him, along with a flashlight and emergency supplies. The crying came from the direction of Elk Ridge Road, toward the newer cabin developments. Sam knew the area. Young couples liked to build there for the views, though they often underestimated the isolation. As he trudged through knee-deep snow, following the sound when the wind allowed, he thought about the stories his uncle used to tell about births during blizzards, about how their people had survived impossible situations with nothing but knowledge, passed down through generations. At St. Mark's Church, the emergency shelter was filling up. Pastor Maggie Thompson was coordinating intake, trying to account for all the remote families, when Bob Hayes from the volunteer fire department came in with troubling news. They'd lost contact with several households on Elk Ridge, including the Miller's cabin. He'd just received a garbled radio transmission from someone who might have been David Miller, but the connection had dropped before they could get his location. Emily's contractions were now 5 minutes apart. She'd given up calling for David an hour ago, but she couldn't stop calling out during the waves of pain. Her voice competed with the storm, a primitive sound that seemed to rise from somewhere, deeper than conscious thought. The fire cast dancing shadows on the cabin walls, and for the first time since David left, true fear began to creep in. She was very much alone, and her baby was very much coming. Then she heard it, a banging on the door that was definitely not the wind. 3 deliberate knocks, followed by a voice calling, Is someone in there? I'm a paramedic. I heard someone. Oh, calling. Emily managed to reach the door, struggling with the lock as another contraction hit. When she finally got it open, she saw a snow-covered figure with a headlamp, a face weathered by years of mountain weather, and eyes that seemed to assess her situation in a single glance. "I'm Sam Whitehorse," he said, stepping inside and immediately closing the door behind him. "I'm a retired ER doctor, and I've delivered my share of babies. Looks like we're about to add one more to that list." "My husband," Emily gasped between breaths. "He went for help, but he hasn't." "He'll find his way," Sam said with a certainty that somehow felt like truth. "Right now, let's focus on you and this baby. What's your name?" "Emily Johnson." "Well, Emily Johnson, you've already done the hardest part. You've stayed calm and prepared. Now let me check how far along you are, and then we'll get through this together." As Sam washed his hands in the water Emily had heated by the fire, he was already assessing the situation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cabin was warm enough. There were clean towels and supplies. Most importantly, Emily had an aura of determined serenity that he'd seen in the strongest mothers. He'd delivered babies in less ideal circumstances, though few as isolated as this. "You're about 8 centimeters, he announced after his examination. "This baby's definitely coming tonight. Have you thought about what you want to do for pain management?" Emily laughed, a sound that surprised them both. "I had a whole plan. Epidural-controlled environment, my husband holding my hand. Now I'm getting a traditional birth by candlelight during a blizzard." Sam smiled as he laid out his supplies, combining his medical kit with items from his medicine bundle. "Sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need, not what we planned. For in my culture, births during storms are considered especially powerful. This child will be strong." Over the next hour, as Emily's labor progressed, Sam found himself drawing on both his medical training and the traditional knowledge his grandmother had taught him. He used guided breathing techniques from his ER experience while also preparing a traditional Cherokee tea that would help with pain and circulation. He told Emily stories to distract her during contractions, tales of his grandmother delivering babies during the coldest winter in recorded Cherokee history, of women giving birth in much more challenging circumstances than this warm cabin. "My great-grandmother," he said, helping Emily adjust her position. "She used to say that every birth is a negotiation between the old world and the new. The baby decides when it's ready to cross over, but we can make the journey easier." Emily found herself hanging onto his words, using them as anchors during each wave of pain. There was something about Sam's presence, competent yet calming, modern yet timeless, that made her believe everything would be okay. When the urge to push became overwhelming, she looked at him with a mixture of fear and determination. "I can feel the baby coming," she managed to say. Sam nodded, his hands already positioned. "Then let's welcome this little one into the world." The next 30 minutes existed outside of time. Emily pushed with strength she didn't know she had, while Sam guided the process with the combined wisdom of medical school and 7 generations of Cherokee healers. The wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, there was only the rhythm of breathing, the crackle of the fire, and the ancient dance of life bringing forth life. When Emily's baby finally emerged into Sam's waiting hands, the cabin filled with a sound that briefly silenced even the storm, the first cry of new life. Sam worked quickly but calmly, clearing the airways, ensuring the cord was properly positioned, his years of experience taking over as he performed the immediate post-birth care. "It's a girl," he announced, placing the baby on Emily's chest. "Perfectly healthy, good color, strong voice. She's going to be just fine." Emily held her daughter for the first time, tears streaming down her cheeks as the reality hit her. She'd just given birth during the worst storm in decades, attended by a stranger who had appeared like a guardian angel, and everything was okay. More than okay, it was perfect in a way her carefully planned hospital birth never could have been. Before we continue with the remarkable conclusion of this story, I want to ask you something. This is the moment that changes not just Emily's life, but the entire community of Cedar Falls. Outside, the storm continued its assault on Cedar Falls, but inside the cabin, a moment of profound peace had descended. Emily cradled her daughter, marveling at how something so perfect could emerge from such chaos. Sam worked methodically, attending to the afterbirth and ensuring both mother and child remained stable. His movements were practiced yet gentle, a combination of emergency medicine protocols and traditional healing techniques that seemed to flow naturally from his hands. "She's beautiful," Sam said, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket he'd warmed near the fire. "Strong grip already. That's a good sign." Emily smiled through exhaustion. "I don't even know how to thank you. You just appeared out of nowhere when I thought—" "The storm carries many things," Sam interrupted gently. "Sometimes it brings help exactly when needed." He was preparing a warm compress for Emily, mixing traditional herbs with hot water. "But our work isn't finished. We need to keep you both warm and comfortable until help arrives." The mention of help brought David back to Emily's thoughts. Where was her husband? Had he found shelter? The worry must have shown on her face because Sam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Mountain storms have a way of teaching patience," he said. "Your husband will return when the storm allows. For now, focus on your daughter. She needs her mother's voice, her heartbeat. These first hours build bonds that last a lifetime." As if responding to Sam's words, the baby stirred against Emily's chest, tiny fingers flexing and releasing. Emily looked down at her daughter, overwhelmed by a fierce protectiveness she hadn't anticipated. This little person had fought her way into the world during one of the most violent storms in recent memory, attended only by her mother's determination and a stranger's kindness. "What's her name?" Sam asked, adjusting the fire to maintain steady warmth in the cabin. Emily hesitated. She and David had discussed names for months, compiling lists and debating the merits of family names versus something entirely new. But those conversations had taken place in a different world, one where births happened in sterile hospital rooms with printed birth certificates waiting to be filled out. "I want to call her Hope," Emily said suddenly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Because that's what tonight taught me. Even when everything seems impossible, hope finds a way." Sam nodded approvingly as he prepared another pot of his herbal tea. "Hope? That's a powerful name." In Cherokee tradition, names chosen during significant events carry special meaning. This little one will always carry the strength of this storm in her spirit. The next hour passed in a sequence of small but essential tasks. Sam taught Emily proper latching techniques for nursing, checked vital signs for both mother and baby, and maintained the cabin's warmth like a vigilant sentinel. His medical bag proved surprisingly well equipped for emergency births, but it was his calm presence that Emily found most reassuring. "You've done this before," she observed, watching him work with quiet efficiency. "Many times," Sam confirmed. "Though each birth teaches me something new. Tonight, I'm reminded of a delivery during a different storm many years ago." He paused in his work, his expression distant with memory. "It was 1978, on the reservation in Oklahoma. My grandmother was the midwife that night, and I was just a boy watching her work. The woman in labor had been alone for days, her family trapped by flooding. Grandmother said the baby chose that moment to be born because great change often comes during great upheaval." Emily shifted hope to her other breast, marveling at how instinctive the process felt, despite never having done it before. "What happened to that baby?" Sam's weathered face broke into a smile. She grew up to become a doctor, one of the first Cherokee women to serve as chief of surgery at a major hospital. She's probably saving lives right now in Tulsa. The story settled over the cabin like a comforting blanket. Emily found herself relaxing despite their precarious situation, trusting in the cycle of care that had brought Sam to her tonight. Outside, the wind continued to howl with undiminished fury, but the sound had begun to feel protective rather than threatening, like nature creating a barrier around their small world. Meanwhile, in the heart of Cedar Falls, St. Mark's Church had transformed into a command center. Pastor Maggie Thompson stood before a large map of the area, marking off locations as volunteer firefighters reported in via radio. The communication was spotty at best, with signals dropping in and out as the storm interfered with reception. "We've got confirmation from Bear Mountain," Bob Hayes reported, hanging up the church's landline. "The Petersons are safe. Heaters, working, plenty of food, but we still haven't heard from Elk Ridge." Maggie traced her finger along the area in question, her brow furrowed with concern. "That's at least 8 families out there. The Millers, the Johnsons, the Red Rocks." "Wait," interrupted Lisa Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the emergency radio. "I think there's someone on the emergency frequency." The static-filled transmission crackled through the room, but the voice was unmistakable despite the distortion. "The emergency shelter, stuck in ditch, mile marker 7, wife in labor." Maggie grabbed the microphone. "This is St. Mark's emergency response. Please identify yourself and repeat your location." "David Miller," came the response, clearer. "Now, my truck went off the road near mile marker 7. My wife Emily is at our cabin on Elk Ridge. She's having the baby right now. I tried to get to town for help, but the storm..." A murmur of recognition ran through the room. Several people knew the Millers, the young couple who had bought the cabin last year, excited to start their family in the mountains. "Mr. Miller, this is Pastor Thompson. Are you safe right now? Are you injured?" "I'm okay." David's voice was tight with anxiety. "But Emily, she's alone at the cabin. The baby's coming, and I can't get back to her. Please, someone needs to help her." Bob Hayes was already moving toward the door. "I'll take the county plow truck. Try to reach him." "The roads are impassable," Dr. Chen spoke up from where she had been monitoring the situation. "Even with a plow, you can't clear that route in this weather, and if his wife is in active labor..." Maggie's mind raced through possibilities, each more challenging than the last. The storm showed no signs of abating. Roads were becoming more treacherous by the hour, and they had confirmation that a woman was giving birth in isolation. This was the kind of emergency that tested not just resources, but community spirit. "Dr. Chen, what do we need to know about unattended birth in these conditions?" The doctor's expression was grim but professional. "The main concerns are hemorrhage, infection, and hypothermia. Without proper medical attention, both mother and baby are at serious risk. The cold makes everything more dangerous. But what if she's not alone?" Someone suggested from the back of the room. "Sam Whitehorse lives out that way, doesn't he? His place is just a few miles from Elk Ridge." A ripple of consideration passed through the gathered volunteers. Sam was known in the community, though. He kept mostly to himself. Some knew of his medical background, others were more familiar with his traditional healing practices. The combination had earned him a reputation as someone who could handle unusual situations. "How do we reach him?" Maggie asked. "The phones are out in that area." "He's got a ham radio," Bob Hayes offered. "I've talked to him on it before. He monitors the emergency frequencies." Within minutes, they had established contact. Sam's voice came through clearly despite the storm static, and his response to their urgent message was characteristically calm. "I'm already with her," he said simply. "Baby's been born. Both mother and child are stable." The relief in the room was palpable, but it was quickly tempered by the reality of their situation. Even with the successful birth, the isolation continued to pose risks. Sam, this is Dr. Chen. What's the mother's condition? Good color, normal bleeding, baby latched. Well, for first feeding, both maintaining body temperature. I've got everything under control here. Maggie looked around the room, seeing the same question on everyone's faces. How had Sam known to be there? Sam, she said into the microphone, can you maintain there here through the night? Affirmative. I've got supplies and traditional medicines. We'll manage until the road's clear. Dr. Chen had been listening intently. Sam, do you have access to antibiotics? Any complications with the placenta? Negative on the antibiotics, but I've got alternative treatments. Placenta delivered complete, no hemorrhaging. Mother's strong. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Dr. Chen providing remote medical consultation while Sam gave detailed reports on Emily's condition. It became clear that Sam's combination of emergency medicine experience and traditional knowledge had created an effective safety net in impossible circumstances. What about the father? Someone asked. David Miller's still stuck on the road. We'll get a team to him first light, Bob Hayes promised. Right now, the priority is keeping that family safe through the night. Back at the cabin, Emily drifted. In and out of a light sleep, hope nestled securely against her chest. Sam maintained his vigil, monitoring their breathing, keeping the fire steady and preparing for potential complications. The medicine bundle his aunt had given him contained not just herbs, but tools passed down through generations. Bone needles for suturing, stone knives kept sharp through careful maintenance, and pouches of ground remedies. Tell me about your grandmother, Emily murmured during one of her wakeful moments. The midwife. Sam settled beside her, his voice taking on the cadence of storytellers from countless generations before him. She was born during the winter of 1889, the year they called the Great Freeze. Her mother went into labor during a blizzard that lasted 7 days. The community ran out of firewood, food was scarce, and many thought both mother and child would be lost. He paused to add wood to the fire, the flames casting dancing shadows that seemed to give life to his words. But my great-grandmother had other plans. She was born on the 7th day, just as the storm broke. The elders said she carried the strength of that storm in her blood, and they were right. She lived to be 94, delivered over 800 babies, and never lost a mother or child to complications. Emily found herself drawn into the story, the history of healing women stretching back through time. Is that why you became a doctor? Partly, Sam admitted, but also rebellion in a way. I wanted to prove that our traditional knowledge could work alongside modern medicine, not be replaced by it. Many of our people were told their ways were primitive, dangerous. I wanted to show that wasn't true. He checked on Hope, who slept peacefully in the cocoon of blankets and her mother's warmth. This little one proves it. Modern protocols say she needed a hospital, monitors, interventions. Traditional knowledge said she needed warmth, patience, and experienced hands. Tonight, both were right. The conversation was interrupted by a sound outside. Not the wind this time, but something more deliberate. 3 sharp knocks followed. By a pause, then 3 more. Sam moved to the window, peering through the frost-covered glass. Medical emergency response pattern, he explained to Emily. Someone's trying to reach us. He opened the door to reveal a figure bundled beyond recognition, but the voice that emerged was familiar to Emily's ears. Emily, thank God you're okay. Her husband David stumbled inside, snow falling from his jacket in heavy clumps. I've been walking for hours. The truck's stuck miles down the road, but the emergency team made contact. They said someone was here, that you'd had the baby. His words trailed off as he processed the scene before him. his wife holding their newborn daughter, the stranger who had materialized from the storm like something from a legend, the cabin transformed into a temporary birthing sanctuary. "David," Emily said softly, "meet our daughter, Hope. And this is Sam. He saved us both." David's eyes moved from his wife to the baby, to the man who had appeared when they needed him most. Exhaustion, relief, and gratitude warred on his face, before settling into simple acknowledgement of a debt that could never be repaid. "The roads are completely blocked," David reported, sinking into a chair by the fire. "But the emergency crew thinks they can get through by morning. They're monitoring the storm, and it's supposed to ease up before dawn." Sam nodded, already assessing David's condition. Signs of frostbite, exhaustion, dehydration. "Let me check. Your fingers and toes. You've been out in this too long." As Sam tended to David's cold injuries, Emily watched her husband meet his daughter for the first time. The fear and anxiety that had driven him into the storm melted away as Hope wrapped her tiny fingers around his offered thumb. This was their family now, born in storm, attended by strangers, stronger for having survived the impossible. "I'm sorry I left," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was helping, but I just made things worse." Emily reached for his hand, her touch erasing his guilt. "You did what you thought was right, and somehow everything worked out anyway. Maybe that's the lesson here. We can't control everything, but we can trust that help appears when we need it most." Sam was preparing another pot of tea, this one designed to help with David's exhaustion and exposure. "In my tradition, births like this are seen as powerful omens. A child born during great storms will be a force for change in the world, and families who endure extreme challenges together develop unbreakable bonds." He handed David a steaming cup. "This will help with the cold. It's an old recipe, willow bark, ginger, a few other things. Safe for everyone, including nursing mothers." The cabin settled into quiet companionship as the night deepened. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but the worst seemed to be passing. Inside, 3 adults and 1 newborn had formed an unexpected alliance born of necessity and sealed by mutual care. Emily found herself studying Sam as he moved efficiently around the small space, checking supplies, monitoring their conditions, maintaining the environment that had kept them all safe. There was something timeless about his presence, as if he belonged to all eras simultaneously, equally at home with modern medical equipment and ancient healing traditions. "Sam," she said during a moment when David dozed and Hope nursed contentedly, "how did you know to check on this area tonight? It seems like more than coincidence." Sam paused in his work, his expression thoughtful. "My Aunt Grace called me this afternoon, said she had a feeling about tonight that someone in the remote areas would need help. She often knows these things before they happen. I've learned not to question her instincts." He resumed organizing his medical supplies, adding, "Besides, checking on neighbors during storms is just what we do. My grandmother used to say that community isn't just who lives near you, it's who shows up when you need them." The wisdom in his words settled over Emily like a warm blanket. She thought about their decision to live in isolation, their excitement at being self-sufficient, their confidence in modern preparations. The storm had stripped away their illusions of independence, replacing them with a deeper understanding of human connection. Dawn approached with agonizing slowness, marked only by the gradual lightening of the cabin's frost-covered windows. The storm's fury had diminished to steady snowfall, and the emergency radio crackled to life with reports of road crews making progress on the main routes. St. Mark's emergency response to Elk Ridge cabin. "Do you copy?" came Pastor Thompson's voice over the airwaves. Sam picked up the microphone. "This is Elk Ridge cabin. All occupants stable. Father returned safely. Mother and newborn showing excellent progress. No immediate medical needs. Copy that, Elkridge. Road crews estimate 3 to 4 hours before reaching your location. Dr. Chen requests detailed status update when possible. As Sam provided the medical information requested, Emily watched the interaction between him and the professional medical community. There was respect in both directions, acknowledgement that his unconventional approach had succeeded where conventional protocols would have failed. It struck her that perhaps the greatest lesson of the night wasn't about surviving emergencies, but about recognizing different forms of wisdom and expertise. David had awakened to feed the fire and stood looking out the window at the transformed landscape. Everything was white, pristine, reborn in the storm's aftermath. "I keep thinking about what could have happened," he said quietly. "If you hadn't been here, Sam." "But I was here," Sam responded simply. "That's what matters. In my experience, dwelling on what might have been steals energy from what is. You have a healthy daughter and a strong wife. Focus on that." Emily adjusted Hope's position, marveling at how natural motherhood had become in just a few hours. "David, what happened out there after you left?" Her husband ran a hand through his hair, still processing his own near disaster. "The storm hit faster than I anticipated. 1 minute I could see the road, the next minute visibility was zero. I tried to keep going, kept telling myself I'd reach town, find help, bring back an ambulance." He paused, staring into the fire. "But then the truck started sliding. I couldn't control it anymore. When I ended up in the ditch, I realized I'd made everything worse. I was further from you than when I started, and now I was stuck with no way to help." Emily saw the guilt still lingering in his expression. "So, what did you do?" "I started walking. Thought maybe I could flag down help, find someone with a working vehicle. But the further I got, the more I realized how stupid I'd been. The storm was getting worse, it was getting dark, and I was moving away from where you needed me." Sam handed him another cup of tea. "Crisis makes fools of us all sometimes. The important thing is recognizing our limitations and adapting." "That's when I activated the emergency radio in the truck," David continued. "Got through to the church, learned that someone was already with you. I can't describe the relief I felt knowing you weren't alone. But I also felt like such a failure." Emily looked at her husband with new understanding. His need to fix everything, to be the provider and protector, had clashed hard with the reality of their situation. In trying to get help, he'd put himself in danger and left her more vulnerable. Yet somehow, in what felt like the universe's cosmic sense of humor, his absence had created space for exactly the right person to appear. "You're not a failure," she said firmly. "You did what you thought was best with the information you had. And maybe that was supposed to happen. If you hadn't left, would Sam have checked on us? Would everything have turned out the same way?" Sam was nodding slowly, stirring something that smelled of herbs and honey on the small stove. "There's an old Cherokee story about a man who spent his whole life regretting a decision he made during a storm. He tried so hard to control the outcome that he missed the gift the storm had brought. Sometimes our mistakes create space for miracles we couldn't have anticipated." The philosophical discussion was interrupted by Hope's wail, her first real cry of hunger and discomfort. The sound cut through their contemplation, returning them immediately to practical concerns. Emily adjusted her nursing position while Sam checked the baby's temperature and color. "She's perfect," he pronounced. "Strong appetite, good reflexes. This little warrior is going to do just fine." As Hope settled back into peaceful nursing, the radio crackled again with updates. The road crews were making better progress than expected, and rescue vehicles were being prepared for dispatch to Elk Ridge Road. Dr. Chen had arranged for a full medical evaluation at the clinic once they could safely transport mother and baby to town. "We should probably prepare for departure," Sam suggested, beginning to gather his supplies. "You'll want to have proper medical documentation of the birth, and both of you should be checked thoroughly." Emily felt a sudden sadness at the thought of leaving this cabin that had seen them through the most intense night of their lives. It seemed wrong to simply pack up and return to normal life after everything that had happened. "Sam," she said, "I don't want to go back to town without understanding something. Tonight wasn't just about medical intervention, was it? It felt like everything aligned perfectly. The storm, your presence, even David leaving when he did. How do you explain that?" Sam paused in his packing, considering her question. With the same serious attention he'd given every medical concern throughout the night. "My grandmother would say that some events exist in the space between what we can explain and what we must simply accept. Scientific medicine explains how babies are born. Traditional wisdom explains why certain births happen the way they do." He sat down across from her, his dark eyes holding centuries of understanding. "Tonight, you needed both. Someone with medical knowledge to ensure safety, and someone who understood that storms carry their own logic. I happened to be both those people. Was it coincidence? Planning? Divine intervention? Each tradition has its own explanation." "What do you believe?" David asked, genuinely curious. Sam smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "I believe that asking the right question is more important than knowing the right answer. Tonight, you asked the universe for help, and help appeared. Maybe that's the only explanation that matters." The distant sound of engines reached them. Through the diminishing storm, the road crews were getting close. Soon, their isolation would end, and with it, this strange pocket outside normal time where profound truths had emerged from desperate necessity. Emily looked around the cabin one more time, memorizing the details, the fire crackling in the stove, the soft light filtering through frosted windows, the sense of peace that had settled over them all. Hope stirred against her chest, a reminder that this night had created not just a memory, but a life that would carry its lessons forward. "Before we go," she said, "I need to ask you something, Sam. Will you be Hope's godparent? Not in any religious sense necessarily, but as someone who will always be part of her story, part of her understanding of how the world works." Sam's eyebrows rose in surprise, then settled as consideration took over. "That's a significant request. In my tradition, accepting such responsibility means committing to that child's spiritual education, being available for guidance throughout their life." "That's exactly what I mean," Emily confirmed. "Tonight proved to me that there are different kinds of wisdom in this world, and I want Hope to have access to yours." David nodded his agreement. "You saved our family, Sam. Not just medically, but in ways we're probably still discovering. It seems right that you'd be part of Hope's life going forward." Sam was quiet for a long moment, the weight of the request settling around him. Finally, he nodded. "In my culture, we believe that children choose their guides even before they're born. Perhaps Hope knew what she was doing, timing her arrival for tonight. I would be honored to accept this role." As if in response to the agreement, Hope opened. Her eyes, for the first time since birth, looking directly at Sam with that unfocused yet somehow ancient gaze of newborns. The moment felt charged with meaning, a sealing of agreements that went beyond words. The engines were getting closer now, and voices could be heard calling through the snow. Their rescue was imminent, but the transition back to ordinary life felt less like an ending and more like a transformation. The cabin would return to being just a building, but they would leave as changed people, a family connected not just by blood, but by having survived the impossible together. Sam finished packing his supplies, including the medicine bundle that had served them so well through the night. As he prepared to greet the rescue team, he looked at the small family one more time, his expression mixing satisfaction with something deeper, perhaps the knowledge that he had witnessed and participated in something that would ripple through generations. "Remember," he said, his voice carrying the authority of both doctor and traditional healer, "this storm was not your enemy. It was your child's first teacher, showing her that life comes with struggle, but also with unexpected allies. Honor that lesson, and she'll grow strong." The door opened to reveal a team of EMTs and volunteer firefighters, bringing with them the cold air of morning and the promise of return to civilization. But as Emily stepped out into the transformed world, Hope bundled safely in her arms and David at her side, she knew that something essential had changed. They had entered the storm as individuals prepared for parenthood. They were leaving it as a family bonded by an experience that transcended ordinary preparation. The journey to town was slow but steady, the rescue vehicle following the path cleared by plows. Emily rode in the back with Hope, attended by EMTs who deferred respectfully to Sam's assessment and care instructions. David sat beside her, his hand finding hers as they watched the snow-covered landscape roll past. "We'll have stories to tell," David said softly, "though I'm not sure anyone will believe what really happened here." "Some stories aren't meant to be believed," Emily replied, looking down at Hope's peaceful face. "They're meant to be lived, and some nights change everything while teaching us that the most important things can't be planned or controlled." As Cedar Falls appeared through the snow, transformed into a winter wonderland by the storm's aftermath, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her, not just for the medical skill that had kept them safe, or the community that had rallied to their aid, but for the larger lesson of the night, that isolation is an illusion, help comes from unexpected sources, and sometimes the universe delivers exactly what we need, in precisely the way we wouldn't have chosen. Hope stirred in her arms, and Emily knew that this story, born in storm, attended by wisdom both ancient and modern, witnessed by the community that had supported them all, would become part of her daughter's foundation, influencing who she would become and how she would face her own life's storms. The truck pulled up to the medical clinic, where Dr. Chen waited with her team to provide the follow-up care that would bridge them from crisis to routine. As they helped Emily and Hope inside, Sam paused at the vehicle's open door. His role as emergency responder complete, but his new role as spiritual guide just beginning. "The storm's over," he said, looking back at the mountains where their ordeal had played out. "But its teachings have just begun. Take time to understand what happened here. Some lessons take years to fully reveal themselves." With that, he disappeared into the gathering crowd of community members who had waited through the night for news of the Elk Ridge family. Emily watched him go, already knowing that his presence in their lives would continue to ripple outward in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Dr. Chen began her examination with professional efficiency, tempered by obvious relief at seeing them all safe. As she worked, Emily caught fragments of conversation from the clinic waiting room, stories of other rescues during the storm, families reunited, neighbors helping neighbors, the community drawing together in response to nature's challenge. "You were incredibly fortunate," Dr. Chen said, completing her initial assessment. "Both you and Hope show excellent vital signs. Sam's emergency care was textbook perfect, better than textbook actually. I've never seen such a seamless blend of traditional and modern techniques in the field." "He's an extraordinary man," Emily replied, adjusting Hope for comfort. "I think we're only beginning to understand how extraordinary." As the morning progressed, the full scope of the storm's impact became clear. Cedar Falls had weathered its worst weather event in recorded history, but the community had responded with resilience and cooperation that strengthened rather than strained their bonds. The Miller's story quickly became part of the larger narrative of survival and mutual aid that would define how the town remembered this night. By afternoon, Emily was settled in a comfortable clinic room, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms, while David dozed in a chair beside the bed. Sam had visited once more, bringing traditional postpartum care instructions and promising to check on them again in a few days. The clinical setting felt simultaneously necessary and oddly sterile after the intimate warmth of the cabin. "Mrs. Miller?" A soft knock announced another visitor, Pastor Thompson, carrying a small basket covered with a cheerful cloth. "I don't want to disturb your rest, but the community asked me to bring this." Emily invited her in, curious about the unexpected gift. Maggie set the basket on the beside table and lifted the covering to reveal an assortment of baby items. Hand-knitted booties, a soft blanket, jars of homemade baby food for later use, and a variety of new parent care items. "Everyone wanted to welcome Hope properly," Maggie explained. "Your story has touched the whole town. In all my years here, I've never seen circumstances quite like last night's. It feels like something significant happened." Emily examined the gifts, each one clearly chosen with care and consideration. "We were just talking about that, how some events seem to carry meaning beyond their immediate facts. Sam called it the space between explanation and acceptance." Maggie nodded thoughtfully. "Sam Whitehorse has a way of seeing deeper than most of us. The elders in his family were known for that kind of wisdom. It's encouraging to see it continue. He's going to be Hope's godfather," David mentioned, looking up from his semi-doze. "Emily asked him this morning." "That's wonderful," Maggie replied, her face lighting with genuine pleasure. "Though I can't say I'm surprised. Some connections are forged in fire, or in your case, perhaps in ice and snow. Those tend to last lifetimes." The conversation continued comfortably, covering practical matters of the Miller family's needs, community support systems, and the gradual return to normal life as road conditions improved. Yet beneath the ordinary exchange, Emily sensed a shared understanding that something extraordinary had occurred, something that would be discussed and re-examined in the months and years to come. As the day waned, the clinic quieted, and the steady stream of well-wishers diminished to occasional visitors. David had driven home to collect essentials and check on their snow-damaged property, leaving Emily and Hope to rest peacefully in the medical center's care. Dr. Chen stopped by for a final check, pronouncing both patients in excellent condition. "You'll be able to go home tomorrow," she announced, "though I recommend taking things very slowly for the next few weeks. What you've been through, physically and emotionally, deserves proper recovery time." "Of course," Emily agreed, though part of her wondered if any amount of time would fully process the events of the last 24 hours. "Doctor, can I ask you something professional?" "Certainly. In your medical opinion, what would have happened if Sam hadn't been there?" Dr. Chen's expression grew thoughtful and serious. "Medically speaking, you were looking at significant risk factors. First-time births can have complications. Cold stress is dangerous for newborns. Bleeding can escalate quickly without proper intervention, and psychological stress can cause serious physiological effects. Without someone with medical knowledge present, the outcome could have been very different." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What strikes me as remarkable is how Sam managed risk factors that typically require extensive equipment and support systems. His combination of traditional knowledge and modern training gave you access to methods I don't learn in medical school. It's actually quite fascinating from a professional standpoint." Emily nodded, storing this confirmation of what she had sensed throughout the night, that multiple forms of wisdom had converged to create the best possible outcome from potentially tragic circumstances. "There's one more thing," Dr. Chen added, her tone shifting to something more personal. "In emergency medicine, we see a lot of coincidences that don't feel like coincidences. We can't always explain why certain people appear at crucial moments, or why some situations resolve against all statistical probability. Last night was one of those times." Sam mentioned that some questions are more important than their answers. Emily reflected. He's probably right. I've learned that the best doctors combine scientific knowledge with respect for what we don't understand. Last night was a perfect example of both working together. After Dr. Chen left, Emily settled into the quiet of evening, listening to Hope's soft breathing and the muffled sounds of the clinic settling into night routine. Outside, she could see the snow still falling softly, a gentle continuation of the storm that had transformed their lives. The window view showed the lights of Cedar Falls, warm, steady beacons of community resilience. Her thoughts drifted to the cabin where it had all unfolded, wondering if they would ever return there. Would she be able to face those walls without remembering every detail of Hope's dramatic arrival? More importantly, did she want to? Some places become sacred through experience, marked forever by events that transcend their ordinary purpose. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation. Sam stood in the doorway, no longer the emergency responder covered in snow, but a quietly dignified man in clean clothes, carrying something wrapped in soft leather. "I hope it's not too late for a visit," he said. "I brought something for Hope." "Never too late," Emily assured him, gesturing for him to come in. "I'm discovering that new parents exist outside normal time anyway." Sam approached carefully, his presence somehow both professional and familiar after their intense shared experience. He unwrapped the leather to reveal what appeared to be a small dream catcher, intricately woven with threads that seemed to shimmer in the low light. "It's a birth blessing," he explained. "In my tradition, children receive these to help filter their dreams and guide their spiritual development. My Aunt Grace made this one specifically for Hope." The gift's significance was not lost on Emily. This represented inclusion into something far older and deeper than last night's emergency, an acknowledgement of Hope's place in a tradition that had sustained people through countless storms and challenges. "It's beautiful," she said, accepting the dream catcher with appropriate reverence. "Please thank your aunt, and thank you for everything. I keep trying to find words adequate to express our gratitude, but they all seem too small." Sam sat in the chair David had vacated, his movements easy and comfortable. "In my experience, the most profound gratitude is expressed through living well, rather than through words. How you raise Hope, the values you teach her, the way you navigate life's storms in the future, that's the real thank you." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching Hope sleep peacefully between them. The dreamcatcher caught the light from Emily's bedside lamp, casting tiny prismatic shadows on the wall. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emily ventured. "When you first appeared at our cabin, did you know it would be you who delivered the baby? Did your instincts tell you that much?" Sam considered this carefully, as he seemed to consider all questions. "I knew someone needed medical help. The specifics revealed themselves as they needed to. But there was something else." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "My grandmother always said that healers are called to where they're needed, not just by their will, but by something larger working through them. Last night I felt called very strongly." "Do you think Hope somehow called you?" "In a way, perhaps. Children often know what they need before adults do. They're closer to the source, haven't yet learned to doubt their connections to the larger web of life." Emily found this perspective both comforting and thought-provoking. It suggested agency. On Hope's part, a participation in her own dramatic entry into the world that went beyond passive experiencing. "Will you tell her this story when she's older?" she asked. "If she wants to hear it. Some children resist their birth stories, especially unusual ones. Others embrace them as foundational myths. But either way, the truth of what happened will be part of her, whether she actively engages with it or not." Hope's cries cut through the peaceful clinic room, signaling her need with the clarity that would become characteristic of her personality. Emily positioned her for nursing, while Sam observed with the practiced eye of someone who had seen countless mothers navigate early bonding. The dreamcatcher rotated gently where Emily had hung it from the bedside lamp, casting delicate shadows that seemed to dance in rhythm with Hope's steady breathing as she settled into feeding. "You know," Sam said, watching mother and daughter with quiet satisfaction, "in Cherokee tradition, we believe children spend their first year of life transitioning between worlds. They're not fully here with us yet, which is why their sleep patterns and feeding schedules seem to follow a different logic than ours." Emily looked down at her daughter, considering this perspective. It certainly explained why infants operated on their own mysterious timeline, seemingly immune to adult expectations of routine. So she's still partly in whatever realm she came from. Something like that. My great-grandmother used to say that newborns were like bridges between the spirit world and our physical reality. Their needs, their cries, even their seemingly random movements were all part of learning how to navigate this denser existence. The idea resonated with Emily's own sense of wonder about Hope's arrival. There had been something almost orchestrated about the timing of everything. The storm intensifying exactly when labor began, Sam's inexplicable presence at just the right moment, even David's misguided departure creating space for the right help to arrive. It felt less like random coincidence and more like a carefully choreographed dance between seen and unseen forces. A soft tap at the door announced Dr. Chen's return, this time for a routine evening assessment rather than emergency care. She entered with the quiet efficiency that marked her work, checking Emily's vital signs and observing Hope's nursing technique with professional approval. "Everything looks excellent," she reported, making notes on her tablet. "I've been comparing your case with similar emergency births in our database, and honestly, the outcomes here exceed what we typically see even in controlled hospital environments." Sam's care protocols were remarkably thorough. He mentioned combining traditional and modern approaches, Emily said, shifting Hope to a more comfortable position. "It seemed to work well. More than well," Dr. Chen agreed. "I've been in emergency medicine for 15 years, and I've never seen such successful improvisation in the field." He managed to address every critical concern, maintaining core body temperature, preventing hemorrhage, ensuring proper infant resuscitation with techniques I don't recognize from standard medical training. Sam remained quiet during this professional assessment, his expression neutral but attentive. Emily sensed there was more to his methods than even he had shared. Layers of knowledge passed down through generations that defied easy explanation or documentation. "The truly remarkable thing," Dr. Chen continued, "is how he maintained optimal conditions for both mother and baby without any of the equipment we normally consider essential. The cabin's temperature logs show he kept the interior at exactly 72 degrees throughout the night, despite the external conditions dropping to -15. "How could you possibly know that?" David asked, returning from his errand with an armload of supplies and looking refreshed despite the day's exhaustion. "The county's been monitoring energy grid fluctuations to assess storm impact," Dr. Chen explained. "Every building's heating signature creates a pattern we can track. Your cabin showed remarkable stability during the peak storm hours, which suggests someone who really knew what they were doing was managing the environment." Emily caught Sam's eye, noting the slight flush that colored his weathered cheeks. Clearly, even he hadn't fully appreciated the precision of his own interventions until hearing them described in technical terms. "Sometimes knowledge runs deeper than conscious awareness," he said quietly. "My hands remembered things my mind might have forgotten." This admission hung in the air, suggesting depths of understanding that went beyond formal education or even traditional teaching. Emily found herself wondering about the true extent of what had transpired in their cabin. How much had been skill and how much had been something more difficult to categorize. Well, whatever combination of factors was at play, Dr. Chen said, closing her tablet, the results speak for themselves. I'll recommend reduced monitoring for both patients. You're both responding so well that extended observation seems unnecessary. After she left, the room settled into evening quiet again. David unpacked the items he'd retrieved from home, including fresh clothes for Emily and a hand-carved wooden box that Emily recognized as her grandmother's. "I thought you might want this," he said, opening the box to reveal old photographs, a few pieces of grandmother's jewelry, and a small leather journal. "I know how much these items mean to you, especially now." Emily accepted the box gratefully, running her fingers over the familiar objects. Her grandmother had been a strong influence during her childhood, teaching her about resilience and practical wisdom in ways that now seemed prescient given recent events. "She would have loved this story," Emily murmured, opening the journal to reveal pages filled with her grandmother's spidery handwriting. "She always said the most important things happen when we're least prepared for them." "Your grandmother was a wise woman," Sam observed, moving closer to look at the journal. "What did she write about?" "Everything. Family histories, recipes, observations about people and nature. She kept these journals for over 60 years. Emily turned pages carefully, showing glimpses of pressed flowers, sketched maps, and philosophical musings. "I used to read them as a child, always amazed by how she found meaning in ordinary events." "May I?" Sam asked, indicating a particular entry that had caught his eye. Emily nodded, watching as he read silently. His expression shifted subtly, and she noticed him glance at Hope before looking back at the journal. "What is it?" David asked, curious about Sam's reaction. "Your grandmother wrote about a dream she had," Sam explained, "about a child being born during a great storm, attended by someone from two worlds. She recorded it exactly 40 years ago next week." The room fell silent as the implications settled. Over them. Emily took the journal back, reading the entry herself with growing astonishment. The details were remarkably specific. A cabin in the mountains, a severe winter storm, a baby girl arriving with the help of someone who walked between traditional and modern paths. "That's impossible," David breathed, though his voice carried uncertainty rather than conviction. "Is it?" Sam asked gently. "Or is it just beyond what we normally allow ourselves to consider possible?" Emily stared at the pages, her grandmother's words seeming to blur and sharpen alternately as she tried to process their meaning. She'd read this journal dozens of times throughout her life, but had never paid particular attention to what she'd dismissed as just another dream entry among many. "She wrote this before I was even born," she said slowly. 40 years ago, she dreamed about this exact situation." "Time operates differently in dreams," Sam offered. "And some people have always been able to see across those boundaries. Your grandmother clearly had the gift." Hope stirred against Emily's chest, making tiny sounds that seemed almost like agreement with the conversation swirling around her. The dream catcher continued its gentle rotation, catching light and throwing shadows that now seemed less random, more intentional. "I need to show you something else," Emily said, feeling a pull to share a detail she had kept private since childhood. She reached into her grandmother's jewelry box and withdrew a delicate silver pendant, a circular design with intricate patterns that created a web-like effect within the metal. "Grandmother gave me this the day before she died, said it would help me recognize truth when it appeared, even if it didn't match my expectations." Sam's eyes widened slightly as he examined the pendant. "This is Cherokee silverwork. Very old, very specific design. It's what we call a recognition piece, meant to identify connections between people who share certain spiritual bonds." "But how would my grandmother have Cherokee jewelry?" Emily asked, though even as she spoke, she sensed she was approaching. An answer that would shift her understanding of her family's history. "May I see her journal again?" Sam requested. When Emily handed it over, he flipped through pages with the familiarity of someone following a mental map. He stopped at a section, near the beginning, pointing to a passage. "Read this part." Emily looked where he indicated, finding an entry from her grandmother's youth. "Today, I met the women of the Wolf clan who were selling silver at the mountain market. One older woman, Grace, took special notice of me. She said I carried the look of someone who would bridge worlds, that my granddaughter would need both paths of wisdom. She gave me a pendant and said to keep it safe for her." "Grace Whitehorse," Sam said softly. "My aunt. She foresaw your role in this story 50 years before it happened." The connections kept multiplying, creating a tapestry of meaning that stretched across decades and generations. Emily felt simultaneously overwhelmed and oddly grounded, as if puzzle pieces were finally falling into place in a pattern she'd never known existed. "So this was all," David began, then stopped, uncertain how to complete the thought. "This was all exactly what it needed to be," Sam finished for him. "Not predetermined, but aligned. The universe has its own timing, and sometimes we're privileged to witness how the pieces fit together." Hope had finished nursing and was gazing up at them with that unfocused intensity unique to newborns. In the lamplight, her dark eyes seemed to hold ancient knowing, as if she too understood the larger pattern they were beginning to perceive. "What do we do with this information?" Emily asked, feeling the weight of all these revelations. "How do we process that Hope's birth wasn't just a random medical emergency, but part of something much larger? You live with awareness, but without attachment," Sam suggested. "Knowledge of the pattern shouldn't change how you raise her day to day. She still needs diapers changed, feedings on schedule, pediatric checkups. The ordinary tasks of parenting ground the extraordinary circumstances of arrival." David had been quiet during this philosophical exchange, but now he spoke up. "I keep thinking about my panic, how I ran out into the storm. If I'd stayed calm, stayed present, would everything have unfolded the same way?" "The actions you took were part of the pattern," Sam reassured him. "Your departure created space for me to arrive. Even what we judge as mistakes can serve larger purposes we can't see in the moment. Like threading a needle," Emily added, understanding dawning. "If the thread is cut too long or too short, held too tight or too loose, it won't work. But when everything aligns just right, the needle gets threaded, often on the first try." As if in response to this metaphor, the lights in the clinic flickered briefly, not a power failure, but a momentary dimming that caught everyone's attention. Through the window, they could see similar fluctuations in the town's lighting grid, a reminder that the storm's effects were still rippling through their infrastructure. "The power grid's been unstable since last night," a nurse explained, checking in to ensure they had everything needed for the evening. "County says it might be days before everything's fully restored, though somehow this wing of the clinic hasn't lost power at all." After she left, Sam smiled knowingly. Buildings that house important transitions often maintain their necessary functions even when surrounding systems fail. Emergency circuits that work when they shouldn't, heating that stays active despite power fluctuations, communication devices that function when all others fail. Like our cabin last night, David realized. The heating worked perfectly, the wood stove drew cleanly, despite the extreme drafts. Even the old oil lamp burned bright and steady in conditions that should have snuffed it out. Emily nodded, remembering details she hadn't fully noticed in the moment, but which now seemed significant in retrospect. "And your medical bag, Sam? You had exactly what was needed, down to specific items that seemed almost too coincidental to have brought randomly. My aunt helped me pack it yesterday evening," Sam admitted. She insisted on certain traditional remedies I hadn't used in years, said they would be needed. I thought she was just being overly cautious about the storm. Hope began to fuss again, this time with the particular cry that indicated a need for diaper change. As Emily and David attended to this basic parental task, working together with the slight awkwardness of new parents, Sam gathered his things to leave, giving them space, for the private intimacy of caring for their child. "Before I go," he said, pausing at the door, "I want you to know that what happened last night will continue to reveal itself in layers. Don't feel you need to understand it all at once. Some truths take years to fully appreciate." "Will we see you again?" Emily asked, wrapping Hope in a fresh blanket. "Tomorrow, if you'd like. I make rounds to all my patients until they're fully settled. But beyond the medical care, you're part of our extended family now. The Wolf Clan takes its guardianship responsibilities seriously." After Sam left, Emily and David worked together, in comfortable silence, navigating the practical challenges of newborn care with growing confidence. The ordinary tasks, cleaning, diapering, arranging blankets, provided welcome grounding after the day's philosophical revelations. "It feels different now," David observed, settling Hope back in Emily's arms for another feeding. "Not just being parents, but being part of something larger. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Emily agreed, "though I'm still processing what that larger something actually is. Ancient connections, prophetic dreams, family patterns stretching across generations. It's a lot to integrate." "Maybe we don't need to integrate it all," David suggested, surprising her with his philosophical insight. "Maybe we just need to live into it. Let it unfold naturally as hope grows." They sat together on the hospital bed, Hope nursing peacefully. Between them, the Dreamcatcher continuing its gentle rotation above. Outside, Cedar Falls was settling into its post-storm recovery, lights flicking back on in sections as crews restored power, neighbors checking on neighbors, the community knitting itself back together after nature's test. Emily found her thoughts drifting to practical considerations for the first time since labor had begun. They would need to baby-proof the cabin, establish routines, integrate their new reality with the ordinary demands of life. Yet, underneath these practical concerns ran a current of profound gratitude for the extraordinary circumstances of Hope's arrival. "I've been thinking about the cabin," she said to David. "Do you think we should move after everything that happened there?" David considered this carefully, looking out the window toward the mountains where their home waited. "Part of me wants to never go back, especially to that room where I left you. But another part knows that's where hope chose to be born, where so much was revealed to us. Maybe running from it would be missing the point." "What do you think the point is?" "That some places become sacred through experience. Our cabin isn't just where we live anymore. It's where hope entered the world, where we learned about resilience and connection and help coming from unexpected sources. Those walls now hold memories that could shape her understanding of home." Emily felt tears prick her eyes at the wisdom in his words. David had revealed depths during this crisis that she'd always suspected but hadn't fully seen before. The storm had tested them both, and while they had each responded differently, they had ultimately come through stronger for the shared experience. "Then we go back to the cabin," she decided. "We make it work for a family. We let hope grow up, in a place marked by the miraculous, while teaching her to appreciate the ordinary rhythms of daily life too." Hope had finished nursing and was drifting off to sleep, her tiny body completely relaxed in Emily's arms. The trust and vulnerability of newborns never failed to move her. This small person, who had spent 40 weeks in darkness and comfort, suddenly thrust into a world of bright lights, loud sounds, and constant stimulation, yet somehow possessed of an innate knowing about how to navigate this dramatic transition. "She's going to be strong," David observed, gently touching Hope's Miniature hand. She's already survived conditions that would challenge most adults. Physically strong, yes, Emily agreed. But what about emotionally, spiritually? The circumstances of her birth are going to influence her in ways we can't predict. How do we parent a child whose arrival was marked by such profound events? The same way all children need to be parented. I imagine, with love, consistency and awareness, the difference might be that we're more awake to the extraordinary within the ordinary because of how we were forced to pay attention during her birth. They talked quietly for another hour, making plans and sharing observations, processing the day's events through the safer lens of practical concerns. The nursing staff checked in periodically, offering reassurance and support with the gentle competence that made the transition from crisis to normal care seamless. As visiting hours drew to a close, Pastor Maggie Thompson appeared in the doorway, with Robert Hayes, the volunteer firefighter who had coordinated much of the rescue effort. They carried a large basket filled with cards, small gifts, and what appeared to be a collection of photographs. "I hope we're not intruding," Maggie said softly, mindful of the late hour. "But there are some things the community wanted you to have, and some images we thought you'd want to see." Robert set the basket down carefully and pulled out a stack of photographs. "These were taken during the storm and rescue operation. We thought Hope might like to have documentation of her dramatic arrival someday." Emily accepted the photos with interest, finding images she hadn't expected. Someone had captured the moment emergency vehicles first reached their road, the volunteer firefighters working to clear paths, even distant shots of their cabin during the height of the storm. But most surprising were photos of Sam, one showing him emerging from the forest before dawn, his medical bag and medicine bundle clearly visible, another of him consulting with Dr. Chen at the clinic, their two approaches to healing bridged in professional collaboration. "Who took these?" she asked, particularly interested in the pre-dawn shot of Sam. "Lisa Rodriguez," Robert explained. "She lives in a cabin about 2 miles from yours, was monitoring the situation all night. She has quite an eye for photography and felt something important was happening. The image captured something Emily hadn't fully processed in the moment. The lonely figure of Sam traversing snow-covered terrain in darkness, guided by something more than sight toward people he didn't know he needed to help. His posture in the photo conveyed both determination and a kind of surrender to forces larger than individual will. "These are incredible," David said, examining each photo with care. "It's like documentation of something we felt, but couldn't quite see while we were living it." "That's exactly what Lisa said when she brought them to the church," Maggie confirmed. She felt the photographs captured the convergence of community, tradition, and emergency response that marked last night as something special. Among the gifts in the basket, Emily discovered several items that spoke to the diverse perspectives within Cedar Falls. A hand-knitted baby cap from the Methodist quilting circle, a small bag of healing herbs with careful labels from Dr. Chen's mother, who practiced traditional Chinese medicine, a children's book about mountain weather written by a local kindergarten teacher, and most touching, a letter signed by everyone at St. Mark's Church, welcoming hope to the community. "This is overwhelming," Emily admitted, fighting back tears. "Of gratitude. We've lived here for less than a year, and the town has embraced us so completely." "That's mountain communities for you," Robert said with characteristic understatement. "We take care of our own, especially during storms. Though I will say your situation has stirred something special in people. It's not every day we witness such a clear example of everything that's good about this place coming together at once." They chatted for a few more minutes, sharing updates about power restoration, road clearing progress, and community assessments of storm damage. The normalcy of these practical conversations provided welcome balance to the day's deeper revelations. After their visitors left, Emily and David prepared for their first night as parents in an official capacity, though Hope had already established irregular sleep and feeding patterns that ignored conventional hospital schedules. The charge nurse had assured them that rooming in was encouraged and that night staff would be available for support without being intrusive. As Emily settled Hope for what she hoped would be a longer sleep period, she noticed David standing at the window, looking out at the town lights that had mostly returned to normal functioning. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How people are scattered all over Cedar Falls right now, dealing with storm damage, checking on neighbors, clearing driveways, sharing resources," he said thoughtfully. "Most of them probably don't know about the extraordinary circumstances that surrounded Hope's birth. To them, last night was just about surviving a bad storm. But for us, it was something more." "Exactly. And I'm wondering if that's how life always works. Some people experience moments of profound significance while others are focused on just getting through the day, and both perspectives are necessary for community to function." Emily found wisdom in this observation. Their experience had been intensely personal, yet somehow universal, their individual crisis finding meaning within the larger pattern of community response. SAMs appeared at precisely the right moment, the emergency. Services coordinated despite failing communication systems. Neighbors checked on neighbors without formal organization. "Maybe that's why certain stories need to be told," she mused. "Not to convince everyone that magic exists, but to remind people that sometimes ordinary actions taken with care and skill can produce extraordinary results." Hope stirred in her sleep, making tiny movements that reminded them both of her presence as the center of their expanded awareness. Emily reached for her grandmother's pendant, now hanging around her neck, and wondered about all the other families throughout history who had experienced similar moments of convergence between practical necessity and spiritual significance. "I want to call my parents tomorrow," David said, returning to sit beside her. "They should know they have a granddaughter, that we went through something amazing to bring her into the world. And I want to visit my mother, show her hope in person. But I'm also not ready to leave this space yet, this bubble where everything that happened feels safe and contained." They held each other for a moment, Hope sleeping peacefully between them, the dream catcher casting its gentle shadows on the wall. Outside, Cedar Falls continued its recovery from the storm, but inside their small clinic room, a different kind of settling was taking place, the gradual understanding that they had crossed a threshold from which there would be no returning. "We're different people now," Emily said quietly. "Not just because we're parents, but because of how we became parents. The storm, Sam's intervention, all those connections across time and tradition, they've changed our baseline understanding of what's possible." David nodded slowly. "The question is how to carry that forward without becoming those people who think everything is a mystical sign or that normal life no longer applies to them." "Balance," Emily suggested. "We let the extraordinary inform the ordinary without overwhelmed it. We raise Hope with awareness of her unique arrival while teaching her practical skills for navigating normal life. We maintain connection with Sam and Cherokee wisdom while engaging fully with our immediate community." As if responding to this resolution, Hope opened her eyes briefly, looking directly at each parent before closing them again with what seemed like satisfaction. The gesture felt like agreement, or perhaps blessing, for the path they were choosing. The night deepened outside their window, and gradually the clinic settled into the quiet rhythms of evening care. Emily and David took turns dozed and monitoring, learning the art of partial attention that new parents must master. Hope maintained her own mysterious schedule, waking for feeding and attention at intervals that defied prediction but seemed to follow some internal logic. Around 3 in the morning, during one of Hope's wakeful periods, Emily found herself alone with her daughter while David grabbed coffee from the nurse's station. The clinic was mostly silent except for soft alerts from monitoring equipment and the distant sound of footsteps on linoleum. She gazed down at Hope, who was nursing with determined intensity. "Your father's right to be practical," she whispered to her daughter. "But something extraordinary did happen around your birth. You chose a pretty dramatic way to arrive in the world, little one. I hope that means you have important work to do here." Hope's eyes locked onto hers with that disconcerting directness that newborns sometimes display. For just a moment, Emily felt she was looking at someone much older, someone who had perhaps chosen this particular configuration of circumstances for reasons beyond normal human understanding. The feeling passed quickly, replaced by the ordinary contentment of feeding her child in a quiet space. But as dawn approached their window, Emily carried with her a deepening sense that Hope's birth story would continue to reveal layers of meaning through the years ahead. When David returned with coffee and reports that the roads to their cabin would be passable by afternoon, they began making plans for discharge and homecoming. The transition from crisis to normal life would happen gradually, with medical follow-ups, community support, and the daily rhythms of infant care providing structure for their adjustment. "I want to do something for Sam," Emily said as they organized their few possessions. "Something meaningful beyond thank you cards or typical gifts. What did you have in mind?" "I'm not sure yet. But he gave us more than medical care. He provided a bridge between worlds that showed us parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. That kind of gift requires a response that matches its depth." David considered this seriously. Maybe the response isn't a thing but a way of living, like carrying forward the lessons, teaching Hope about different forms of wisdom, staying open to moments when the ordinary and extraordinary intersect. "Yes," Emily agreed, feeling the rightness of this approach. "Our gratitude expressed through how we raise our daughter, how we engage with our community, how we remain aware of the larger patterns even while handling daily life." As morning light filled their room, painting everything in soft gold tones, the Miller family prepared to leave the medical transition space and return to their mountain home. Hope slept peacefully in the car seat borrowed from the clinic, oblivious to the preparations for her first journey back to the place of her birth. Dr. Chen made a final appearance to review discharge instructions and express personal congratulations that went beyond professional courtesy. "You've given our whole staff something to think about," she said. "The convergence of emergency protocols, traditional practices, and sheer serendipity that marked Hope's arrival has us all reconsidering how we think about medical intervention." "Will you stay in touch?" Emily asked. "I'd like Hope to know all the people who were part of her birth story as she grows up." "Of course. And I expect to see you both for regular checkups, at least until she's through her first year. Living this far from medical facilities requires extra vigilance with infant care." They exchanged contact information, creating formal structure around what had begun as an emergency connection. Emily sensed that Dr. Chen represented another bridge between evidence-based medicine and acknowledgement of factors that couldn't be measured or predicted through standard protocols. As they prepared to leave the clinic, Pastor Maggie arrived for one final visit, this time accompanied by Sam's Aunt Grace, whom Emily had never met but immediately recognized as significant to their story. Grace moved with the measured dignity of someone who carried knowledge accumulated over many decades, her presence commanding attention without effort. "I wanted to meet the family who received my nephew's care," Grace said simply, studying each of them with eyes that seemed to see more than surface details. When her gaze landed on Hope, her expression softened into something approaching wonder. "And to meet the child whose arrival required such precise timing." "Sam told us about your dream," Emily said carefully. uncertain how to address someone who had apparently foreseen elements of their crisis decades earlier. About foreseeing needs that hadn't yet revealed themselves. Grace waved a dismissive hand. Dreams are common. Acting on them is what matters. Sam has always been good at both the seeing and the doing. She reached into her bag and withdrew a small pouch, similar to but distinct from the medicine bundle Sam had carried. "For Hope's first home," she said, pressing it into Emily's hands. "Hang it above her sleeping space. It contains protections, specific to her birth circumstances." The gift felt warm in Emily's palm, as if it carried its own energy. She thanked Grace sincerely, adding it to the growing collection of items that would help bridge worlds in their home. "One more thing," Grace added, fixing Emily with a penetrating stare. "Your grandmother's journal. Read the entries from her early motherhood. She recorded some things that might help you understand the patterns you're now part of." Before Emily could ask for clarification, Grace had turned to leave, moving with surprising speed for someone of her years. Sam had inherited his aunt's talent for appearing and disappearing at precisely the right moments. As they finally gathered everything for departure, Emily noticed David examining Hope with new intensity, clearly processing the morning's additions to their already complex story. "Every time we think we understand what happened," he said quietly, "someone adds another layer. How deep do you think these connections actually go?" Emily adjusted Hope's car seat straps one final time, looking around the clinic room where they had spent their first 24 hours as an official family. "I think we'll spend the rest of our lives discovering the answer to that question, and I think that's exactly as it should be." With final goodbyes to staff who had become part of their extended story, the Miller family walked out of Cedar Falls Medical Clinic into the brilliant March sunshine. The town looked transformed in daylight, snow-covered but gleaming, damaged but resilient, ordinary yet somehow newly significant in their eyes. As David loaded their belongings into the truck and secured Hope's car seat, Emily stood for a moment in the crisp air, breathing deeply the clear mountain atmosphere that had been so threatening less than 48 hours earlier. Now it felt welcoming, cleansed, full of possibility. "Ready to go home?" David asked, helping her into the passenger seat. "Home," Emily repeated, tasting the words full of meaning. "Yes, let's go home." The drive to Elk Ridge Road would take them through the heart of Cedar Falls, past St. Mark's Church, where the community had gathered during their crisis, by the roads where countless volunteers had worked through the storm to help neighbors in need, then up into the foothills where their cabin waited, marked now as the birthplace of extraordinary events, yet still fundamentally the same structure it had been before. As they began the journey, hope secure between them, Emily felt the beginning of integration, the profound settling of extraordinary experience into the foundation of ordinary life. Their daughter would grow up knowing both worlds, taught to appreciate magic without losing practical skills, connected to ancient wisdom while fully engaged with modern life. The Dreamcatcher swayed gently as the truck navigated freshly plowed roads, and Emily found herself already composing the first entry in what would become Hope's own journal, a chronicle of growing up in the space between practical necessity and spiritual abundance, in a community held together by both organized systems and spontaneous kindness, attended by people who walked easily between different forms of knowledge. Outside, Cedar Falls gradually gave way to mountain vistas, the storm-battered landscape, revealing a beauty intensified by recent adversity. Emily reached for David's hand, feeling the warm weight of hope in her car seat behind them, knowing they were beginning the long, satisfying work of transforming crisis into story, experience, into wisdom, community connections, into the enduring fabric of family life. The cabin waited ahead, sun glinting off its snow-covered roof, smoke rising from a chimney someone had thoughtfully tended in their absence. Home, changed and unchanged, ready to hold them as they learned what it meant to be parents to a child, whose birth had woven them irrevocably into a pattern they were only beginning to comprehend. 1 year had passed since that transformative March night, and spring had returned to Cedar Falls with the gentle persistence that marked the changing of seasons in Montana's mountains. Emily stood in the kitchen of their cabin, preparing Hope's first birthday celebration, while watching her daughter take increasingly confident steps across the wooden floor that had witnessed her dramatic entry into the world. Hope moved with the determined grace that had become her signature trait, pausing frequently to investigate objects with the scientific curiosity that seemed to characterize her developing personality. At 12 months, she displayed an unusual ability to focus intently on tasks, whether stacking blocks, examining leaves, or studying the faces of the extended community that had gathered regularly throughout her first year. The physical changes to their cabin reflected the expansion of their lives beyond that initial crisis. The birth room had evolved into a proper nursery, but Emily had followed her instinct to maintain elements that honored the space's significance. The walls now displayed photographs from that night, alongside traditional Cherokee birth blessings that Grace Whitehorse had provided. The wooden cradle board Sam had gifted hung decoratively, while a modern crib served practical sleeping needs. David entered from outside, carrying an armload of early spring flowers he had been cultivating specifically for this day. The garden they had expanded after the storm now served multiple purposes, providing food security, medicinal herbs recommended by both Dr. Chen and Sam, and flowers chosen for their significance in various cultural traditions represented in their community. "The memorial garden's really taken," he reported, arranging stems in a vase with the careful attention he now brought to many tasks. "Those seeds from Maggie have created something beautiful where the hardest labor happened." Emily paused in her preparation of traditional Cherokee birthday foods, lessons learned during monthly gatherings with Grace, to look through the window at the transformed landscape. Where snowdrifts had once threatened survival, rainbow plantings now celebrated life's persistence. The visual transformation served as daily reminder of how crisis could generate beauty when approached with intention and community support. "People will start arriving soon," David noted, checking the time. "Should we wake Hope from her nap?" "Let her finish. She'll need the energy for this afternoon's celebration, and she's been maintaining such consistent sleep patterns lately." The establishment of routines had been one of their early post-storm challenges, balancing the unpredictability of infant care with the natural rhythms of mountain life. Dr. Chen had provided guidance based on altitude pediatrics, while Sam contributed traditional perspectives on child development that often complemented modern approaches in unexpected ways. Their first knocker of the day proved to be Lisa Rodriguez, arriving early with photographic equipment and what had become her signature covered dish contributions to community gatherings. Over the past year, Lisa had evolved from neighbor to unofficial family documentarian, her artistic eye capturing the subtle ways Hope's birth had catalyzed changes throughout Cedar Falls. "I wanted to set up before the crowd arrives," she explained, arranging cameras at angles that would capture the celebration without intrusion. "And to give you this privately first." She handed Emily a leather-bound album titled simply Hope's First Year on the cover. Opening it revealed carefully curated images, documenting not just major milestones, but the quiet moments of integration. Sam teaching traditional infant massage techniques, Dr. Chen and Grace comparing notes on postpartum recovery, community members contributing to Hope's care in ways that had normalized cultural synthesis. "This is extraordinary work," Emily said, studying images that captured developments she had lived through but hadn't consciously observed. You've documented something much larger than our individual story. That's exactly what I realized as the year progressed, Lisa replied. Hope's birth became a catalyst for the kind of community evolution people talk about theoretically, but rarely see implemented practically. I felt responsible for preserving the process. David joined them in examining the album, pointing out photographs that showed his own transformation from panic-driven reactor to confident mountain father. One image particularly struck him, a shot of him working alongside Robert Hayes to install the upgraded weather monitoring system they had designed after learning how unpredictably their area's microclimate could shift. I barely recognized that panicked person from Storm Night, he admitted. Though I suppose the fundamental instinct was right. I wanted to get help. I just hadn't learned yet how many forms help takes. Their conversation was interrupted by the distinctive sound of Sam's truck, this time hauling a small trailer containing what appeared to be wooden benches and tables, clearly constructed for the day's gathering. Community project, he explained, as they moved outside to help unload. Many hands made light work, but we thought you should have furniture that could handle both indoor and outdoor gatherings. This mountain weather changes quickly, as you've learned. The craftsmanship was exceptional, showing the collaborative work of several families who had contributed different skills to the construction. Emily recognized carving patterns that incorporated Cherokee symbols alongside mountain wildlife motifs and what appeared to be meteorological references, honoring the storm that had connected them all. This is incredibly generous, she managed, touched by another demonstration of how their community had deepened its bonds through shared experience. But also unnecessary. We've received so much support already. Community care isn't transactional, Grace Whitehorse observed, emerging from the truck's passenger side where she had ridden in companionable silence. It's reciprocal and ongoing. Your family's experience became everyone's learning opportunity. The return isn't to you specifically, but to the whole network of relationships. Emily helped Grace navigate the uneven ground toward their cabin, noting how the elder moved with the careful deliberation that marked advanced years while maintaining the purposeful energy that had made her an intimidating presence during their earlier interactions. "Hope sleeping now?" Grace asked with the casual prescience that had ceased to surprise them. For about 20 more minutes, according to her pattern, David confirmed, having become expert at his daughter's rhythms through attentive daily observation. "Perfect timing then. I brought her first-year ceremony items. Some traditions are best maintained precisely rather than approximately." Inside, Grace unpacked a collection of objects whose significance Emily had been learning to understand. Throughout their year of cultural education, each item told part of a story about Indigenous perspectives on child development, community responsibility, and the intersection of spiritual and practical wisdom. A small sage bundle wrapped in deer hide would be burned during the blessing ceremony. Cornmeal mixed with herbs specific to storm births would mark Hope's forehead. A piece of quartz found at significant elevation represented clarity of purpose that mountain-born children were believed to embody naturally. "We adapt traditions to current contexts," Grace explained as she arranged items on the kitchen table that had become the center of many family discussions throughout the year. But core meanings persist across generations. Hope's birth during extreme conditions marks her as someone who will help others navigate change. Emily found herself simultaneously honored by and uncertain about this designation. Over the year, she had watched her daughter develop into a remarkably composed infant who seemed to observe and process environmental information with unusual attention. Whether this reflected the circumstances of her birth or simply individual, temperament remained open to interpretation. The gathering slowly filled with faces that had become family through shared intensity and ongoing relationship. Pastor Maggie Thompson arrived with her guitar and a group of musicians who had been rehearsing songs specifically composed for the celebration. Dr. Chen came bearing medical supplies and educational materials she had prepared for parents navigating infant development in mountain environments. Robert Hayes coordinated the arrival of various county officials who had asked to participate after learning that Hope's birthday would also mark the formal launch of the community emergency response protocols developed from lessons learned during her birth. "We've got representatives from 3 medical schools attending," he confided to Emily and David during a quiet moment. "Your experience has influenced national discussions about integrating traditional knowledge with emergency medicine. They want to observe how this community actually implements collaborative approaches." The weight of being observed as model, case study battled with the desire to simply celebrate their daughter's first year in privacy. Emily found herself grateful when Hope woke from her nap with the happy sounds that announced readiness for social interaction. As Emily brought Hope downstairs, the gathering naturally oriented around the child whose birth had catalyzed their collective evolution. Hope displayed none of the shyness that might affect some 1-year-olds in crowds, instead reaching for familiar faces with obvious pleasure while maintaining composed observation of newer attendees. "She recognizes her role already," Grace observed with satisfaction as Hope accepted being passed among adults with regal tolerance. Community-born children understand they belong to more than just nuclear family. The formal parts of the celebration blended multiple traditions that none of the participants could have imagined combining before Hope's birth created necessity for synthesis. Maggie led a brief ecumenical blessing that incorporated Christian, Cherokee, and secular gratitude expressions. Sam conducted the traditional 1-year marking with Grace's ceremonial objects, his movements precise with ancestral memory, while remaining accessible to non-Indigenous participants. Dr. Chen spoke briefly about what medical science had learned. From their experience, her academic language softened by personal involvement in the community that had formed. She presented Emily and David with a certificate recognizing their contribution to emergency medicine education, while acknowledging that some forms of knowledge transcended formal documentation. "The most significant finding from studying Hope's birth," she announced to the gathered community, "wasn't any single intervention or technique. It was the demonstration that multiple wisdom traditions, when applied with respect and skill, create optimal outcomes that surpass what any single approach could achieve independently." Lisa captured candid moments as Robert Hayes formally presented the community with their new emergency response protocols, explaining how each element derived from lessons learned during the March storm. The county had adopted their model as template for rural emergency preparedness, with plans to share it statewide. But more important than official protocols, Robert emphasized, is the understanding that emergency response begins with daily attention to community relationships. Knowing your neighbors, maintaining communication systems, respecting different forms of knowledge, these create resilience before crisis arrives. As afternoon sun angled through spring clouds, painting the gathering in warm tones that enhanced the feeling of celebration, the formal program gave way to organic socializing. Children played while adults conducted conversations that moved easily between practical planning and philosophical reflection on how catastrophe had transformed into community strength. Hope found herself at the center of these interactions, not as burden, but as bridge between generations and perspectives. Older residents shared stories of previous crisis responses, comparing notes with recent arrivals about different approaches to mountain preparedness. Younger parents sought specific guidance about infant care at altitude while contributing their own innovations in sustainable homesteading. The food reflected their community's synthesis, with traditional Cherokee dishes prepared by Grace's extended family, alongside mountain specialties contributed by longtime residents and international cuisines introduced by newer arrivals, like the Chen family. The long tables Sam had brought accommodated this abundance, while conversations flowed around shared meals. As evening approached, the celebration shifted toward more intimate gathering. On the deck, David had expanded to accommodate their increased hosting responsibilities. Hope, exhausted from social stimulation but still engaged, sat supported between her parents while the remaining guests settled into comfortable conversation. "I want to share something," Lisa said during a natural pause in discussion. She pulled out her phone and displayed a time-lapse video compilation spanning the entire year since Hope's birth. "I've been documenting our community changes weekly, and the progression is remarkable." The video showed seasons cycling through their mountain landscape while capturing the gradual transformations in human relationships. Regular gatherings at various homes, collaborative projects emerging organically, children integrating across age groups with increasing freedom. The physical changes to individual properties as families implemented shared resource strategies. "What strikes me most," Lisa narrated as images flowed past, "is how crisis created permission for vulnerability and cooperation that might have taken decades to develop otherwise. Hope's birth didn't just change her family. It accelerated community evolution in ways we're still discovering." Dr. Chen added her professional perspective. "Biologically, stress responses can trigger rapid adaptation in social species. What we witnessed here follows patterns seen in resilient communities worldwide, but the specific combination of factors, indigenous knowledge preservation, emergency medical innovation, geographic isolation, challenging conventional resources, created a unique case study. Some things can't be studied, only lived," Sam contributed with characteristic economy. "Statistics capture what happened. Stories preserve why it mattered. Both have value, but they serve different purposes." As darkness gathered, someone lit lanterns around the deck while Hope dozed against Emily's chest. The remaining guests formed a loose circle, faces illuminated by soft lighting that encouraged the kind of deeper conversation that marked genuine community. Grace produced a talking stick, initiating a tradition Emily had learned occurred at significant gatherings in Cherokee culture. Each person who chose to speak would hold the carved wooden piece while sharing observations about how the past year had affected their understanding of community, resilience, or child development. The sharing revealed profound personal changes alongside practical improvements. Families described how they had implemented traditional food preservation techniques after learning about them during collaborative cooking sessions. Parents reported attempting mixed approaches to infant care that balanced modern pediatric guidance with traditional practices. Emergency responders detailed how their training now incorporated cultural consultation protocols. David's turn with the talking stick brought unexpected emotional clarity. "Before Hope's birth, I thought strength meant independence. That crisis taught me strength is interdependence, not just asking for help, but being worthy of it by contributing what you can to others' needs." Emily followed with her own reflection. "Becoming a parent during extremity taught me that we don't protect our children by controlling their environment, but by preparing them to engage with complexity." Hope was born into a convergence of medicine, culture, and community cooperation. We're raising her to navigate between worlds rather than choosing one over another. Hope stirred as the talking stick reached Maggie, who had been composing quietly. Children born during transformation carry its energy forward, not as burden, but as capacity. Hope's presence reminds us daily that crisis and blessing often wear the same face. As the ceremonial sharing concluded, Robert Hayes stood to make a formal announcement. The county has decided to designate this anniversary as Cedar Falls Community Resilience Day, not just commemorating the storm, but acknowledging how we responded to it and continue building from that foundation. Applause rippled through the gathering as people recognized both celebration and ongoing commitment implicit in the designation. Hope woke fully at the sound, looking around with alert curiosity at the environment that had formed during her sleep. "There's one more thing," Sam said, gesturing to Grace, who produced a wrapped package from the Cherokee Nation's Traditional Birth Practices Preservation Initiative, an official recognition of Hope as a storm child who represents successful integration of ancestral knowledge with contemporary emergency care. The gift proved to be a beautifully woven blanket, incorporating patterns that told the story of her birth through Cherokee visual language. Emily traced the symbols slowly, understanding how their individual crises had been received into cultural frameworks that gave it meaning beyond their personal experience. As guests began departing, offering final embraces and promises to continue regular gatherings, Emily found herself holding Hope on the deck, where they had spent so many hours over the past year processing changes both intimate and communal. "We're responsible for something larger than we anticipated," she said to David as they watched vehicle lights descend mountain roads toward home. "But not alone in it," he replied, gesturing toward the memorial garden where flowers bloomed in patterns that honored both crisis and celebration. "That's what we learned and keep learning. Responsibility distributes across networks. We do our part while others do theirs." Inside their cabin, as they settled Hope for sleep in her nursery that doubled as memorial to her dramatic birth, Emily noticed how the space had evolved to hold both ordinary infant needs and extraordinary significance. Practical baby equipment, shared room with ceremonial objects from multiple traditions. Medical reference books sat beside journals filled with traditional wisdom and community observations. This integration continued throughout their home, where Cherokee protective symbols hung near American Academy of Pediatrics growth charts, where traditional herbs grew alongside vegetables designed for high-altitude gardens recommended by county agricultural extensions, where their library expanded to include emergency preparedness manuals, cultural studies, medical resources, and philosophical texts exploring the nature of synchronicity and community resilience. As they performed Hope's bedtime routine, Emily realized how their practices now seamlessly combined learned traditions with intuitive parenting. The feeding, bathing, and dressing included elements suggested by both Dr. Chen and Grace, modified through their own experience and Hope's individual responses. David sat in the rocking chair that had become his favorite spot for goodnight stories, this evening choosing a book about mountain ecosystems that included traditional and scientific perspectives on seasonal changes. Hope listened with characteristic attention, while Emily prepared the herbal foot bath that had become part of their evening wind-down routine. "Tomorrow, we begin year 2, Emily observed, watching Hope's eyes grow heavy as familiar routines enacted their soothing magic. With all this expanded understanding, but the same daily work of raising a child. "Maybe that's the real lesson," David suggested, his voice soft in deference to Hope's approaching sleep. "The ordinary contains the extraordinary when approached with awareness. Crisis opens our eyes, but living well requires keeping them open through normal times too." As Hope's breathing shifted into sleep rhythms, they stood together in the doorway of her room, observing the peaceful child who had become the center of their expanded universe. The cabin held them safely while outside, spring continued its patient work of renewal that neither required nor acknowledged human understanding. Their year of integration was complete, marked by celebration that honored both personal transformation and community evolution. Hope would wake to her second year of life in a context radically different from what either parent could have anticipated, surrounded by relationships that crossed cultural boundaries and wisdom traditions that challenged contemporary assumptions about separation between modern and traditional knowledge. Emily's last waking thought was gratitude for the continuous unfolding of meaning from that storm-driven night, for the community that had formed around their crisis, and for the daily opportunity to parent a child whose birth had demonstrated that help arrives when needed, that wisdom bridges worlds, and that resilience grows from accepting interdependence. As sleep took her, the cabin settled into night quiet, broken only by the soft sounds of 3 lives breathing in, synchronized, rhythm with the larger pattern sustaining them all. Outside, stars wheeled through mountain darkness, while somewhere in the distance, an owl called questions that would be answered by others in conversations predating human presence and extending beyond individual lifetimes. Their particular story continued into whatever transformations the future would bring, grounded now in community networks, cultural synthesis, and practical wisdom gained through necessity. Hope's sleep carried forward all the lessons of her first year while preparing for whatever unique challenges her second year would present. The storm child rested peacefully in her mountain home, surrounded by the accumulated care of an extended family formed through crisis and sustained through intention. Tomorrow would begin another cycle of ordinary days infused with extraordinary awareness, another year of growing into the space between worlds that had marked her entrance into life. Their cabin on Elk Ridge Road had become not just shelter, but a node in the living network of relationships that made survival possible and transformation inevitable. Under the vast wheel of stars, 3 lives participated in the greater rhythms that sustained them all, complete in their present moment while opening toward unknown tomorrows that would test and deepen what they had learned when the storm brought. Understanding about the true nature of help, community, and the bridges between traditional wisdom and contemporary need. In the morning, they would wake to continue the work of integrating extraordinary experience into ordinary life, raising a child who embodied possibility for synthesis rather than separation, contributing to community resilience built on recognition. That crisis reveals what was always true. We exist not as isolated individuals, but as participants in webs of mutual care, extending across generations, cultures, and forms of knowing. The anniversary celebration complete, they rested now in the satisfaction of patterns recognized and responsibilities accepted, surrounded by the Montana mountains that had tested them and the community that had held them through testing. Hope's first year had transformed crisis into foundation, revealing how response to emergency could catalyze changes that strengthened rather than stressed the social fabric that makes human life possible in challenging environments. As night deepened around their cabin, the Miller family continued their quiet breathing in harmony with forces larger than individual will, sustained by networks of care that had been revealed through necessity and confirmed through daily practice of attention, reciprocity, and respect for the multiple forms wisdom takes when communities face challenges requiring all available resources. Their story moved forward now into whatever future would demand, carried on by a child born in storm who represented not just their family's survival, but their community's capacity to transform crisis into opportunity for expanded understanding and deeper connection. The cabin held them safely while around and through and beyond their individual lives, the larger patterns continued their ancient work of sustaining life through change, revealing resilience through relationship and demonstrating that help exists in forms we recognize only when we stay awake to possibility. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.